The number is 24. That's roughly what an entry-level animator in Japan is estimated to earn per finished frame in yen, a figure that converts to somewhere around 20 cents. Keep that number in your head, because everything else in this video eventually has to explain how 20 cents a frame turned into a global industry worth more than $30 billion a year. Somewhere between that animator's desk and a toy store shelf in Ohio, value gets created and then quietly redirected somewhere else. This video is going to trace exactly where that money goes, who takes it, and who never sees it, using real companies, real numbers, and one uncomfortable pattern that repeats itself at every single stage of the industry. Anime wasn't built by a boardroom, it was built by a broke medical student named Osamu Tezuka, and the compromise he made in the 1960s still shapes every anime you've ever watched. Tezuka wanted to make something like Disney, but Disney was animating every frame in full, lush detail, and Tezuka couldn't afford anything close to that. So he cut corners on purpose. He reused backgrounds, he limited how many drawings appeared per second, he put the money into faces and eyes instead of full body motion. It looked cheap at first, then it became a style, then that style became the entire visual grammar of anime. Remember Tezuka's name, because this isn't the last time his decisions will matter tonight. Tezuka made one more decision that mattered even more than the art style, and this is where the money story actually begins. When Astro Boy became a hit in Japan, American television stations wanted it too, and Tezuka licensed it to them for almost nothing. He wasn't trying to get rich off broadcast fees, he was trying to get his work seen, and he figured the real money would come later from merchandise built around the characters once people knew who they were. That single choice, license the show cheap, sell everything else expensive, became the accidental blueprint for how the entire industry would eventually make its money. Hold on to that idea. It's going to explain something strange you'll see in about 10 minutes when we look at why the most successful anime franchise on Earth barely profits from the anime itself. Here's where the numbers get real. Producing a modest 12-episode original anime season in Japan today typically costs somewhere in the range of $2 to $4 million, based on industry estimates. Compare that to a single episode of a big-budget American prestige drama, which can run $10 to $15 million on its own, and you start to see why anime has become one of the most cost-efficient content categories a streaming platform can buy. But that $2 to $4 million figure is a floor, not a ceiling. It buys competent animation. It does not buy the kind of visually stunning, clip goes viral on its own animation that studios increasingly need to stand out. That level of quality can push a season's budget past $10 million, and somebody has to cover the gap between the cheap version and the impressive version. Increasingly, that somebody isn't a Japanese broadcaster anymore. It's a streaming company headquartered thousands of miles from Tokyo, and we'll come back to why that shift matters more than it sounds. Now, follow the money through an actual anime production, because this is where Tezuka's old licensing trick becomes an entire economic system. For decades, most anime was funded through something called the Production Committee, a group of companies, a toy manufacturer, a publisher, a music label, a merchandiser, who pool money to make the show and then each cash in on their own specialty afterward. The toy company sells figures, the label sells the soundtrack, the publisher sells manga. The show itself is often the least profitable piece of the whole arrangement. It functions more like a 30-minute weekly advertisement for everything being sold around it than a product meant to earn money on its own. Nowhere is that clearer than with Pokémon. The anime series itself generates relatively modest profit through licensing fees, but the franchise surrounding it, games, trading cards, plush toys, theme park attractions, has generated an estimated $100 billion or more in total revenue since 1996, making it, by most industry rankings, the highest earning media franchise ever created, ahead of Star Wars, ahead of Marvel. A cartoon about catching monsters in tiny balls quietly out-earned every superhero franchise Hollywood has ever assembled, and it did it almost entirely without the show being the main event. One Piece runs the same play on a different scale. The manga has sold an estimated 500 million copies worldwide, which is why Netflix didn't just gamble on a good story when it greenlit a live-action adaptation in 2023. Reports put the budget at somewhere around $18 million per episode, a genuinely enormous number for anything anime-related. Netflix wasn't betting on a script, it was betting on 25 years of proven fan spending, the same logic Tezuka stumbled onto by accident. Get people emotionally attached first, and the money follows on its own terms. And that emotional attachment is precisely what Sony paid over $1 billion to buy access to. Crunchyroll started as a barely legal fan site streaming pirated anime before it went legitimate. Today, it's owned by Sony, reportedly serves more than 15 million paying subscribers, and cost Sony an estimated $1.2 billion to acquire outright in 2020. Nobody pays that kind of money for a niche hobby platform. Sony paid it because anime had stopped being a subculture and started being a financial category serious enough to fight over. So if the committees, the streaming platforms, and companies like Sony are pulling in these numbers, here's the question worth sitting with for a second. Who's actually drawing all of this? Who's making the 3,000 or so individual frames that go into a single episode, week after week, on a deadline that never stops? Keep that question open, because the answer is where the story turns. The person drawing those frames is very often the same entry-level animator earning that estimated 20 cents each. And here's the part that makes the arithmetic genuinely brutal. Many in-between animators aren't paid by the hour. They're paid per completed drawing. A careful, meticulous animator, exactly the kind of person you'd want working on your favorite show, can end up earning less than minimum wage while working 80-hour weeks, because speed pays more than precision under this system. Industry surveys have estimated that early career animators in Japan can earn as little as $10,000 to $12,000 a year, in a country where rent in Tokyo alone can consume a third of that. Some studios house junior animators in shared dormitories, less because it's a perk and more because independent housing simply isn't affordable on what they're paid. This isn't a side note. It's the mechanism the entire committee system depends on. Remember the structure we just walked through? The studio doing the actual drawing is usually a subcontractor, paid a flat fee regardless of what happens next. If the show becomes a merchandising phenomenon on the scale of Pokémon, the animators who built the visual world frame by frame typically see none of that upside. All the risk sits with the people doing the drawing, all the reward sits with the company selling the toys. That's the pattern Tezuka's cheap licensing trick eventually calcified into. Undervalue the creative work, overvalue everything sold around it. That pattern is now actively threatening the industry's ability to keep functioning. Studios report real, growing difficulty finding enough skilled animators to meet exploding international demand. And it isn't because talent has dried up, it's because a job that pays what we just described has developed a reputation, a fair one, for being unsustainable, and talented people leave the field within a few years of entering it. So even as global revenue climbs, the pipeline actually producing the content is straining under a labor shortage the industry built for itself. That shortage is also why anime production has quietly become an international operation. A large share of the labor-intensive in-between animation for Japanese shows is now handled by subcontracted studios in South Korea and China, because Japan's domestic workforce alone can no longer keep pace with how much content gets greenlit every season. The anime you're watching, labeled Japanese, may have been assembled by artists across 3 or 4 countries, racing a deadline so tight that studios have occasionally aired episodes with visibly unfinished animation rather than delay a broadcast slot. Here's a question worth asking yourself honestly. If you knew that badge or figure in your room was made possible by someone earning $10,000 a year to draw it, would it change how you feel about buying the next one? Sit with that, because it's relevant to why fans keep spending the way they do, and it's worth dropping in the comments what you think, because people genuinely disagreed on this one. Fans keep spending because anime fandom doesn't behave like a normal audience. It behaves more like a sports fan base or a religious community, and that distinction is the real engine behind every number in this video. A casual streaming viewer watches a show once and moves on. An anime fan watches the show, reads ahead in the manga, buys a figure of their favorite character, wears that character's cosplay at a convention, buys the soundtrack, and re-watches the whole thing a second time. Each step is a separate transaction, and researchers who study fandom behavior have found that parasocial attachment, the one-sided emotional bond a fan forms with a fictional character, predicts repeat spending far more reliably than the show's actual quality does. People aren't buying a headband because it looks good, they're buying a piece of an identity, and identity-driven spending tends to survive recessions that kill off more casual entertainment purchases. That's exactly what conventions are selling, and it's a bigger business than most people assume. Anime Expo in Los Angeles now reportedly draws more than 300,000 attendees over a single weekend, generating tens of millions of dollars across tickets, vendor booths, and the hotel and travel spending it pulls into the host city. What's actually being sold isn't a screening schedule. It's 3 days where a subculture that often feels invisible gets to be the majority, and organizers have become extremely good at pricing every layer of that feeling, from standard admission up through premium badges and deliberately scarce merchandise drops. All of this growth sits on top of real risk, and the biggest one is oversaturation. Streaming platforms competing for content have pushed studios to produce more simultaneous seasonal shows than the existing talent pool can realistically support at high quality. In a recent single season, more than 200 new anime titles reportedly premiered within roughly 3 months. No fandom, however devoted, can financially sustain 200 shows at once. Most of those titles disappear into a streaming library nobody scrolls past page 1 to find, and the committees behind them quietly absorb the loss. It's the same pattern that hit the video game industry during past periods of overproduction. Chase one successful formula too hard, and you drown even the good shows in noise. There's a second risk almost nobody outside the industry talks about, and it circles back to something we mentioned earlier about who's really funding these shows now. A large share of anime's international revenue is licensed in yen and resold abroad in dollars and euros. When the yen weakens sharply against the dollar, as it has in recent years, Japanese content effectively gets cheaper for foreign streaming platforms to license, which boosts international demand. But that same currency shift squeezes the real-world purchasing power of the animator earning that flat yen-based rate we discussed earlier. The exact market movement that helps Sony expand its global anime ambitions can simultaneously make rent harder to afford for the person actually drawing the frames. Growth and hardship tied to the exact same number on a currency chart. Now, let's go back to Tezuka's protege, in spirit, if not literally, Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, because they represent the one strategy that breaks the pattern we've been building this entire video. Ghibli films famously take years, sometimes over a decade, to finish, using painstaking hand-drawn animation that deliberately refuses shortcuts.